My name is Emma, and I always thought my mornings were pretty normal. But that day, everything changed. It started with something silly me, standing at the front door, digging through my purse for my keys. I could hear Mark, my husband, laughing from the kitchen. "Lost them again, Em?" he called out, his voice full of that teasing warmth I loved and sometimes found annoying. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help smiling. He always seemed to know when I was about to lose something, like he had a secret power. He just laughed at me, like he knew something I didn't, I thought, feeling a little embarrassed but also a bit suspicious. Why was he so amused this time? I finally found my keys, buried under a mountain of old receipts and gum wrappers. Mark grinned at me as I left for work, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was up to something. All day, I kept thinking about that look on his face. Was it just a joke, or was there more to it? When I got home, I tossed my purse on the couch and tried to forget about it. But later that evening, when I reached in to grab my phone, my fingers brushed against something strange. It felt like paper, but thicker and rougher than a receipt. I pulled it out, and my heart skipped a beat.
It was a map.
Not a normal map, but one that looked old and hand-drawn, with squiggly lines and funny little symbols. There was a big X in the middle, and next to it, in Mark's handwriting, were the words, "For us only." My mind started racing. Why would Mark hide a map in my purse? Was this some kind of joke or a surprise? I turned the map over, looking for clues, but all I found was a tiny drawing of a flower in the corner. It looked familiar, but I couldn't remember where I'd seen it before. My heart pounded with excitement and confusion. Was this the secret Mark had been laughing about? What did "for us only" mean? I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the map. Part of me wanted to laugh and toss it aside, but another part of me felt a strange pull, like the map was calling me to follow it. I thought about Mark's smile that morning, the way he seemed to know something I didn't. Was he waiting for me to find this? Was this a game, or something more serious? I couldn't decide if I was annoyed or curious, but I knew I had to find out. I tried to remember if Mark had ever mentioned anything about maps or secrets before, but nothing came to mind. The more I stared at the map, the more questions I had.
Why now?
Why hide it in my purse? And what was I supposed to do next? I felt a mix of excitement and worry. What if this was something important? What if it was just a silly prank? I couldn't help but wonder if Mark was testing me, or if he needed my help with something he couldn't say out loud. As I sat there, the house felt quieter than usual. Even the ticking clock seemed to slow down, like time was waiting for me to make a move. I thought about calling Mark and demanding answers, but something stopped me. Maybe I should play along, just for a little while. Maybe the map was the start of an adventure, one that only Mark and I could share. My fingers traced the lines on the paper, and I felt a shiver of excitement. What if this was the beginning of something big? What if the map led to a secret that would change everything? I stood up, clutching the map, my mind spinning with possibilities. I had no idea what I was about to discover, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't ignore the mystery. I had to find out what Mark was hiding and why he wanted me to be the one to find it. As I took a deep breath and looked around the room, I wondered, what would I find if I followed the map? And what secret was waiting for me at the end? I could barely sleep that night. The map was all I could think about. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those squiggly lines and the words "for us only." I kept replaying Mark's laughter in my mind, wondering if he was just being playful or if there was something more. By morning, my curiosity had grown into a storm. I needed answers, and I needed them from Mark. As soon as he walked into the kitchen, I was ready. I held the map behind my back, trying to act casual, but my heart was pounding. Mark poured himself a cup of coffee, humming like nothing was out of the ordinary. I couldn't take it anymore. "Mark," I said, my voice a little shaky. "Do you know anything about this?" I pulled out the map and held it up. His eyes sparkled with mischief, and a slow grin spread across his face. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a sip of coffee and leaned against the counter, looking at me like he was waiting for a punchline. "Where's your sense of adventure, Emma?" he finally said, his tone light, but his eyes serious. Don't you want to see where it leads? I stared at him, half annoyed and half excited. Is this a joke? I asked. Or is there something you're not telling me? Mark just shrugged, that same teasing smile on his lips. Maybe both, he said. But you'll have to follow the clues with me to find out. I wanted to be mad at him for being so mysterious, but I couldn't help feeling a thrill. It was like we were kids again, about to sneak out on a secret mission. Still, I needed to know if this was just a game or if it meant something more. Mark, seriously, I said, trying to sound stern. What is this about? He just laughed and shook his head. Trust me, it'll be worth it, but you have to play along. No skipping to the end. I looked at the map again, searching for anything that might give me a clue. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before, a tiny riddle written in the corner, almost hidden by the lines. It said, "Where the roses bloom and secrets grow, the first answer waits below." My mind raced. Roses? Secrets? I thought about all the places we knew with roses, but only one made sense. Aunt Lila's garden. She was famous in our family for her wild, beautiful roses and her love of secrets. I glanced at Mark, and he nodded, like he could read my mind. Looks like we're going to see Aunt Lila, he said, grabbing his keys. As we drove to Aunt Lila's house, I kept glancing at Mark, trying to read his expression. He seemed calm, almost too calm, like he'd been planning this for a long time. I wondered if he was nervous, too, or if he was just enjoying the game. My thoughts bounced between excitement and suspicion. Was this just a fun adventure, or was there something Mark wasn't telling me? I wanted to ask, but I didn't want to ruin the moment. Instead, I stared out the window, watching the world blur by, and wondered what we would find in Aunt Lila's garden. When we arrived, Aunt Lila greeted us with her usual big hug and a twinkle in her eye. She looked at the map and the riddle, and for a moment, I thought she might laugh it off. But instead, she grew quiet, her eyes softening as she traced the lines with her finger. "Some secrets are meant for family," she said, almost in a whisper. I felt a chill run down my spine. Was she in on this too? Or did she know something we didn't? Mark and I followed Aunt Lila into the garden, the air thick with the smell of roses and something else, anticipation. She pointed to a spot near the old oak tree, where the roses grew wild and tangled. "If you're looking for answers, start there," she said, her voice gentle but firm. Mark squeezed my hand, and together we knelt by the roses, searching for anything out of place. My heart raced as I dug through the soft earth, my fingers brushing against something hard and cold. I pulled out a small, rusty box, my hands shaking. Mark looked at me, his eyes wide with excitement and something deeper, maybe fear, maybe hope. I opened the box, and inside was an old photograph and another, smaller map. The photograph showed Mark as a little boy, standing in this very garden, holding a map that looked just like the one I'd found in my purse. My breath caught in my throat. "Is this about your past?" I whispered, looking at Mark. He didn't answer right away, just stared at the photo, lost in thought. Aunt Lila watched us from the porch, her face unreadable. I could feel the weight of the secret pressing down on all of us. What was Mark hiding?
Why now?
And what would we find if we kept following the clues? As I held the photograph and the new map, I realized this was no longer just a game. It was something much bigger, something that could change everything I thought I knew about Mark, and maybe even about myself. But I couldn't stop now. I had to know the truth, no matter where the map led us next. What secret from Mark's past was waiting to be uncovered? And why did it feel like we were only just beginning? My hands trembled as I held the old photograph, the edges soft and worn from years of being touched. Mark's face in the picture was so young, so full of hope, and he was holding a map almost exactly like the one I'd just found. I looked up at Mark, searching his eyes for answers, but he was quiet, lost in memories. Aunt Lila stood on the porch, her arms folded, watching us with a look that was both proud and sad. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on all of us, and I knew this was no longer just a playful game. This was about family, about secrets, and about something Mark had carried with him for a long time. I took a deep breath and turned my attention to the new map. It was smaller, but just as mysterious, with more squiggly lines and another riddle written in the corner. Where the trains once ran and laughter echoed, the next piece waits in shadow. I read it out loud, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark's eyes flickered with recognition, but he didn't say anything right away. I could tell he was thinking hard, trying to remember something from long ago. Aunt Lila stepped closer, her voice soft. "Some secrets are meant for family," she repeated, her eyes shining. "But some are meant to be found." She gave Mark a gentle pat on the shoulder, then turned and walked back inside, leaving us alone in the garden. I looked at Mark, my heart pounding. "Is this about your past?" I asked again, my voice shaking. He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the photograph. "It's something my dad and I started," he said quietly. "But we never finished it. He passed away before we could." His words hung in the air, heavy and sad. I reached for his hand, squeezing it tight. "Then let's finish it together," I said, my voice steady. Mark looked at me, a small smile breaking through his sadness. "Yeah," he said, "let's do it." For a moment, we just stood there, holding hands, surrounded by the scent of roses and the memories of the past. But the new map was calling, and I could feel the adventure pulling us forward. We left Aunt Lila's house and got back in the car, the photograph and the new map between us. As we drove, I kept glancing at Mark, trying to imagine what he must be feeling. Was he scared? Excited? Or just lost in memories of his dad? I wanted to ask, but I didn't want to push him. Instead, I focused on the riddle. "Where the trains once ran and laughter echoed," I repeated, thinking hard. Suddenly, Mark snapped his fingers. "The old train station," he said. "My dad used to take me there when I was little. We'd play hide and seek and pretend we were going on adventures." His eyes lit up with the memory, and for the first time, I saw a spark of the little boy from the photograph. We drove to the abandoned train station on the edge of town, the place looking even older and more forgotten than I remembered. We parked the car and walked up the cracked steps, the air thick with dust and the echoes of the past. As we stepped inside, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The station was empty, but it felt alive with memories, Mark's laughter, his father's voice, the sound of trains that hadn't run in years. We started searching, following the lines on the map and looking for anything that seemed out of place. Mark led the way, his steps sure and steady, but I could tell he was nervous. Every time he found something, a loose brick, a faded sign, he'd glance at me, as if looking for reassurance. I tried to stay calm, but my heart was racing. What would we find here? And what would it mean for Mark? As we searched, I couldn't help but think about Aunt Lila's words. Some secrets are meant for family. Was this the secret Mark's father had left behind? Or was there something more? The questions swirled in my mind, making it hard to focus. But then, just as I was about to give up, Mark called out, "Emma, over here." I rushed to his side, and he pointed to a spot on the wall where the bricks looked newer than the rest. He pressed on one and it slid back with a soft click. Inside the wall was a small, dusty key, tied to a piece of string. Mark's hand shook as he picked it up, his eyes shining with tears. "This is it," he whispered. "This is what we were looking for." I hugged him tight, feeling his heart pounding against mine. But even as we celebrated, I couldn't help but wonder, what did the key open? And what would we find next? The adventure wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. What secret was waiting for us behind the next door? And would we be ready for what we found? I could still feel the weight of the tiny key in my hand as we left the old train station. Mark was quiet, lost in thought, his fingers tracing the string tied to the key over and over. I wanted to ask him what he was thinking, but I knew some feelings were too big for words. The air between us was thick with questions. What would the key open, and what would we find when we used it? I glanced at Mark, hoping for a clue, but he just gave me a small, nervous smile. "We're getting close, Sam," he said softly. "I can feel it." His words sent a shiver down my spine. I wondered if he was excited or scared, or maybe both. We were so focused on the next clue that we almost didn't notice Detective Harris, our neighbor, watching us from across the street. He was always nosy, always poking around where he didn't belong, but today he seemed extra interested. He waved at us, his eyes narrowed with curiosity. "Out for a little adventure?" he called, his voice half joking, half suspicious. Mark and I exchanged a quick look. The last thing we needed was Harris getting involved in our secret search. I tried to act casual, waving back and forcing a smile. "Just running errands," I shouted, hoping he'd lose interest. But Harris just grinned and started following us, his footsteps echoing behind us as we walked back to the car. Mark leaned close and whispered, "We need to lose him." I nodded, my heart pounding. It felt like we were in a spy movie, trying to outsmart the detective. We ducked into a small alley, pretending to look at a shop window, then slipped out the other side and hurried to the car. I could see Harris in the rearview mirror, still watching, still curious. "He's not going to give up easily," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mark just grinned. "Let's see if he can keep up with us." We drove through town, taking turns and back roads, trying to shake Harris. Every time I thought we'd lost him, I'd catch a glimpse of his car in the distance. It was almost funny, the way he kept popping up, but it also made everything feel more urgent. The stakes were higher now. We weren't just solving a family mystery, we were trying to keep it safe from prying eyes. I wondered what Harris would think if he knew what we were really doing. Would he laugh? Or would he try to take the secret for himself? Finally, after what felt like forever, we managed to lose him near the old library. Mark let out a sigh of relief, and I couldn't help but laugh. "That was close," I said, my nerves buzzing. Mark smiled, but his eyes were serious. "We have to be careful, Em. This isn't just a game anymore." His words made my heart race. I realized how much this meant to him, how important it was to finish what he and his dad had started. We pulled out the new map and studied it together. The lines led us back to the train station, but this time to a different part, the old storage room in the back, a place Mark remembered from his childhood. "My dad used to hide things there," he said quietly. "It was our secret spot." I could see the memories flickering in his eyes, a mix of happiness and sadness. We made our way back inside, careful to stay out of sight in case Harris was still lurking nearby. The storage room was dark and dusty, filled with old boxes and broken furniture. Mark led the way, his steps sure and steady. He stopped in front of a small, metal locker built into the wall. The lock was old and rusty, but the key fit perfectly. My heart pounded as Mark turned the key and opened the door. Inside was a small wooden chest, covered in dust. Mark lifted it out, his hands shaking. "This is it," he whispered, his voice full of wonder and fear. We sat on the floor, the chest between us. Mark hesitated, then slowly opened the lid. Inside was a folded letter and a silver locket. The letter was addressed to Mark, in his father's handwriting. Mark's hands shook as he picked it up, his eyes filling with tears. I reached for his hand, squeezing it tight. "You can do this," I whispered. He nodded, then began to read. As Mark read the letter, I watched his face change, first surprise, then sadness, then a kind of peace. The letter was full of love and wisdom, a message from his father that had waited all these years to be found. The locket glimmered in the dim light, a symbol of family and new beginnings. I felt tears in my own eyes, knowing how much this meant to Mark. But even as we sat there, holding the letter and the locket, I couldn't help but wonder, what would we do now that the secret was out? And what would happen if Detective Harris found out what we'd discovered? The adventure wasn't over yet. In fact, it felt like a new chapter was just beginning. What other secrets were waiting to be found? And were we ready for whatever came next? Mark's hands shook as he finished reading the letter from his father. I could see the tears in his eyes, but there was something else there too, a kind of relief, like a heavy weight had finally been lifted. I reached out and hugged him, holding him close as he tried to catch his breath. The old train station was quiet around us, the only sound the soft rustle of the letter in Mark's hands. I wanted to say something, to comfort him, but I knew this was a moment he needed to feel for himself. I just sat with him, letting the silence wrap around us like a blanket. After a while, Mark handed me the letter. "You should read it too, Em," he said, his voice soft. I unfolded the paper, careful not to tear the fragile edges. The handwriting was neat and careful, each word chosen with love. The letter told the story of the treasure hunt Mark's father had created for him when he was a boy. It was supposed to be a game they played together, a way to share adventures and secrets. But when Mark's father got sick, the game was left unfinished, the clues hidden away and forgotten. The letter explained how much Mark's father loved him, how proud he was, and how he hoped Mark would one day finish the adventure and find the real treasure. Not gold or jewels, but the memories they made together. As I read, I felt tears prick my eyes. I could picture young Mark running through the train station, his father laughing beside him, both of them full of hope and excitement. I looked at Mark, and he smiled at me, a real, honest smile that made my heart ache. "He wanted me to share this with someone I love," Mark said quietly. "That's why I made the map for you. I wanted you to be part of it." My heart swelled with love and pride. I realized this wasn't just about solving a mystery, it was about Mark letting me into the deepest part of his heart. I picked up the locket from the chest, turning it over in my hand. It was silver, with a tiny rose engraved on the front, the same flower I'd seen drawn on the first map. I opened it and found a small picture inside. Mark as a boy, standing with his father in the garden, both of them smiling. On the other side was a tiny slip of paper with one last riddle. The key to the future is hidden in the wall. I looked at Mark, my mind racing. "There's one more clue," I said, showing him the paper. He nodded, determination shining in his eyes. We searched the storage room, tapping on the walls and listening for a hollow sound. Finally, behind a loose brick, we found a small hole. Mark reached in and pulled out a tiny, old-fashioned key. It was cold and heavy in his hand, and for a moment, we just stared at it, wondering what it would unlock. The letter had said the real treasure was the memories, but I couldn't help feeling that there was still something waiting for us, one last secret, hidden away for all these years. We looked around the room, searching for anything that might fit the key. In the corner, half buried under a pile of old newspapers, we found a small, locked box. Mark's hands shook as he slid the key into the lock and turned it. The box popped open with a soft click, and inside was another letter, this one even older than the first. It was from Mark's grandfather, written to Mark's father when he was a boy. The letter talked about family, about the importance of love and forgiveness, and about how every generation leaves something behind for the next. There was also a tiny gold ring, simple and beautiful, with the same rose design as the locket. Mark stared at the ring, tears streaming down his face. "This was my dad's," he whispered. "He must have wanted me to have it." I hugged him again, feeling the weight of all the years and secrets pressing down on us. The real treasure wasn't the ring or the locket or even the letters. It was the love that had been passed down through the family, hidden in riddles and maps, waiting to be found. But even as we sat there, holding the ring and the letters, I couldn't help but wonder, what would we do with these secrets now that we'd found them? Would we share them with Aunt Lila? Would we tell Detective Harris if he asked? And what other adventures might be waiting for us, just around the corner? The story wasn't over yet. In fact, it felt like we were only just beginning to understand what it meant to be a family and what it meant to share our secrets with the people we love. What would happen next? I couldn't wait to find out. Sitting on the dusty floor of the old train station, I felt like time had stopped. Mark turned the gold ring over and over in his hand, his eyes shining with tears and wonder. The letters, the locket, the ring, they were all pieces of a puzzle that had taken years to solve. I could feel the love and hope that Mark's father and grandfather had poured into every clue, every riddle. It was as if they were right there with us, cheering us on as we reached the end of the journey they had started so long ago. But even as we held the treasures, I knew there was one last thing we had to do. The final riddle in the locket, The key to the future is hidden in the wall, still echoed in my mind. I looked at Mark and he nodded, understanding what I was thinking. We searched the storage room again, this time with new eyes, looking for anything we might have missed. In the far corner, behind a loose board, we found a small, hidden compartment. My heart pounded as Mark reached inside and pulled out a tiny, velvet pouch. Inside the pouch was a small, brass key and a folded piece of paper. Mark opened the paper, and we read the words together. For the one you love and the life you build together. This is your new beginning. I looked at Mark, my eyes filling with tears. The key wasn't just for a box or a locker, it was a symbol, a promise for the future. Mark smiled at me, slipping the ring onto my finger and pressing the locket into my palm. This was never about the map, he whispered. It was about us, about family, about love, about finding our way together. We sat there for a long time, holding each other, letting the meaning of the journey sink in. The real treasure wasn't gold or jewels, or even the beautiful ring. It was the connection we'd built, the memories we'd made, and the love that had grown stronger with every step. I realized that Mark had given me the greatest gift of all, his trust, his heart, and a piece of his past that he'd never shared with anyone else. As we packed up the treasures and prepared to leave the train station, I felt a sense of peace and closure. The adventure had brought us closer than ever, and I knew we would carry these memories with us for the rest of our lives. But even as we walked out into the sunlight, I couldn't help but wonder, what other secrets might be waiting for us, hidden in the corners of our lives? What new adventures would we find, now that we'd learned how to follow the clues together? The story wasn't just about solving a mystery or finding a hidden treasure. It was about learning to trust, to forgive, and to open our hearts to the people we love. As Mark and I walked hand in hand toward our car, I glanced back at the old train station, feeling a quiet gratitude for everything we discovered. The map, the riddles, the secrets, they had all led us here, to this moment, to each other. But as we drove away, I caught a glimpse of Detective Harris peeking around the corner, his eyes wide with curiosity. I smiled to myself, knowing that some secrets are meant to be shared, and some are meant to be kept just between the people who need them most. What would we tell Harris, if he asked? Maybe nothing. Or maybe, just maybe, we'd invite him along for the next adventure. After all, who knows what other mysteries are waiting to be solved? And who knows what treasures we might find, as long as we keep searching, together. As we drove home from the old train station, the afternoon sun painted golden stripes across the dashboard. Mark was quiet, his hand resting gently in mine, both of us lost in our thoughts. I kept glancing at the ring on my finger and the locket in my palm, feeling the weight of everything we discovered. The map, the riddles, the hidden treasures, they had all brought us here, but the real gift was something deeper. I realized that the adventure had changed us, weaving our hearts together in a way I never expected. When we got home, I tucked the map and the letters safely into a small box and placed it on the highest shelf in our closet. I wanted to keep them close, not just as reminders of the journey, but as proof of what we could do together. Mark watched me, his eyes soft and full of gratitude. "Thank you for solving this with me, Em," he said, his voice quiet but strong. "I couldn't have done it without you." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "Sometimes, the best secrets are the ones that bring us closer," I replied, echoing the lesson I'd learned along the way. That night, we sat on the porch, watching the stars blink into the sky. The world felt different, bigger, somehow, and full of new possibilities. Mark squeezed my hand, and I could tell he was thinking about his father, about the memories they'd shared and the ones we'd made together. I leaned my head on his shoulder, feeling safe and loved. The pain of the past had softened, replaced by hope and a sense of belonging. I knew that whatever happened next, we would face it together. As the days passed, life slowly returned to normal, but I found myself looking at everything with new eyes. The smallest things, a laugh, a shared cup of coffee, a walk in the garden, felt more precious than ever. I realized that the real treasure wasn't hidden in a box or locked behind a riddle. It was right here, in the moments we shared and the love we built every day. The adventure had taught me to look for magic in the ordinary, to trust the people I love, and to believe that even the hardest secrets can lead to something beautiful. Sometimes, I'd catch Mark glancing at the closet, a thoughtful look on his face. I knew he was remembering the journey, just like I was. And every now and then, I'd find him sketching new maps on scraps of paper, a playful smile on his lips. "What are you up to now?" I'd ask, and he'd just wink and say, "You'll see." It made me laugh, but it also made me wonder, what other adventures might be waiting for us, just around the corner? I realized that life is full of open loops, questions we haven't answered, mysteries we haven't solved, and dreams we haven't chased yet. And maybe that's what makes it all so exciting. As I tucked the old map away one last time, I whispered a quiet promise to myself. I would always be ready for the next adventure, no matter where it led. Because in the end, the best secrets are the ones that bring us closer, and the greatest treasures are the memories we make along the way. And as long as Mark and I kept searching, together, I knew our story was far from over. What would tomorrow bring? I didn't know, but I couldn't wait to find out.